Good morning, everyone. Here we are. We're doing Saturday revision of Muslim beliefs and practices for our mock exam coming up, but you might be rewatching this again before the summer exams that you have too. And we're going to focus on these areas and actually quotes as well. So do a show of hands once you've got a piece of paper and you're ready to go. Perfect. Yes. Good morning, everyone. And hopefully you saw in assembly, or maybe Miss Gunning was very, 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 very pleased that you're coming to these sessions, and the people who won the Kahoot as well. So I did let your tutors know too that you are here in the morning revising, getting ready for your mock exam. So we're not doing the crossword. Okay, here we have got what is called the 6 and the 5. Now, you may have them written down already, or you can jot them down now. The 6 articles of faith are sort of stated articles that Sunni Muslims believe as part of their, as sort of the most important key beliefs that you would have as a Muslim. And they are all taken from the Quran, they're all taken from the revelation of Prophet Muhammad as those sources of authority. So each of them, you could have quotes, or you could have to give a quote in the exam to back it up and to say why a Sunni Muslim may have this as a belief. But they're very similar to most of the 5 roots of faith, or usul ad-din, in Shia Islam. Why are they similar? Someone want to type in the chat, like, how come that we got Tawhid here and Tawhid here, prophethood, prophethood? Why are they similar? Any guesses? Yeah, they both believe in God, and they both got what as the source of authority? They both got the Quran as the source of authority. So there's lots of quotes coming up later that they're going to be important for Sunni Muslims because it's in the Quran, you know, but perhaps they're the ones that form the Shia beliefs as more, you know, more significant or important. There's just this one that I've done in yellow. Tell me, why do you think I've done this one in yellow, somebody? Why have I highlighted the yellow one in the 5 roots of faith in Shia Islam? What's special about that, do you think? Yeah, that's something that is, yeah, only the roots have this belief in the imams. So that is something that is sort of special, I guess we could say, or unique to the Shia interpretation of Islam. Whereas the other things are all fairly similar, aren't they? You know, the oneness of God is in both, because as Abba said, both Sunni, to be a Muslim, you believe in God and the oneness of God, don't you? We have got 2 words that are used for prophethood, but both, you know, are to do with prophethood and revelation from God to humans. That's because in the Quran it says Nabi and Rasul, but that's A level that we cover then. So in the exam, they might say Nabawa and then that's the Shia word for prophethood, or Risala is the Sunni word, although I've heard Nabawa be used for that as well. So just know those 2 words. And then you've got angels, and then authority of holy books and the Day of Judgment. They are all still important in Shia Islam, aren't they? It's just angels aren't there as one of the 5 roots of faith, but they're still important. It's just like saying that, you know, for Sunni Muslims, God being just and fair is important, but it's not one of their 6 articles of faith. The supremacy of God's will is that we kind of, you know, God willing, inshallah, people say, don't they? You know, it's up to God if God wills it. And in Shia Islam is this idea of the justice of God. Sunnis do believe that God is just, but this idea of the justice of God is really central as one of the 5 roots of faith, adalat. And that is one that you might get questions on as well in the exam. You could be asked something like, how does a belief in adalat influence a Muslim today? So you'd have to think of actions that a Shia Muslim might do because of this belief in the justice of God, which we can come to later when we're talking about the 4 markers. But the one that's different, I guess, is the belief in the imamate in Shia Islam. Now, a Shia Muslim would say that does have its roots in the Quran and in the Hadith, but a Sunni Muslim would say that that isn't their interpretation of it. So I just wanted to start with that, saying, you know, both of them take their authority from the Quran and the Hadith, because that's the sources of authority in Islam, isn't it? Maybe I could ask you to type in the chat, why is there this belief in the imamate in Shia Islam? Or what do you remember about the imamate as a Shia belief? How about type down for me, why is there, and what is it that Shia Muslims believe about the imamate? Anyone remember? Who do Shia Muslims believe was the first imam? Anyone there? Are you still with me? Great. So they're all from the Prophet's bloodline. Exactly. And Hussein is remembered as a martyr. Fantastic. So Ali and Hussein are two important imams that you need to know the names of. And there's, well done, Rebecca. Yeah, Ali was the first imam for Shia Muslims. Okay, so I'm going to read through this with you. And if you don't want to jot notes down, you can. But you will have this in the video anyway, but also I'll post the PowerPoint in Google Classroom. So the imamate is one of the 5 roots of faith, Uzul ad-Din, within Shia Islam. Whilst there are many things Sunni and Shia Muslims both believe, the imamate is kind of unique within Shia Islam. So I think it's quite important to know. You could have a question about the differences and similarities. You could have a question explaining what the imamate is, or how it might influence a Muslim today to have this belief in the imamate. Okay, good. And like I say, you might have one about, having to refer to a source of authority. So we'll try and find lots of sources of authority for you to take. So after the Prophet Muhammad, who was, revealed the Quran, the final revelation to humanity, passed away, certain people, it's believed by Shia Muslims, from the Prophet's bloodline were the rightful successors of the faith. So all born from the Prophet's bloodline. And the first one being Ali. Ali was the son-in-law, but also cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. He was married to, someone tell me who Ali was married to? Anyone remember her name? The Prophet's daughter. Ali was married to, Uthman was one of the caliphs. Ali was married to Fatima. Yeah, well done, Fatima or Fatima, yeah. She was the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad who lived and then gave the Prophet Muhammad grandchildren, yeah? So she was the bloodline continued through her. And so Fatima and Ali were the Prophet's daughter and son-in-law, but Ali was also related through blood as a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. So they are the bloodline of the Prophet Muhammad. And through them, the Prophet Muhammad had 2 grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. Sunni Muslims too accept this setup, Fatima, Ali, and then the grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. And you've mentioned Hussein earlier. So they're still important in Sunni Islam as the Prophet's family to know about the Prophet and everything. But for Shia Muslims, Ali was chosen to be the next successor, the next leader. They believe the Prophet Muhammad did choose Ali and that he was kind of wrongly not given that role, but it went to Abu Bakr instead. Now, it's a sign of God's compassion. I've heard Shia Muslims say this is a sign of God's love for us and compassion, that rather than leave the Ummah and the Muslim community without any guidance, without any leaders after the Prophet Muhammad passed, God has appointed the imams to lead and guide, not as prophets, but as kind of guiders to help lead Muslims in their life. Yes. Just one second. Okay, good. Any questions so far? So they are guides. And we have this word here, infallible, which means without sin. So this is quite an important part of what Shia Muslims believe about the imams. So they're not prophets, but they are without sin. They haven't sinned and their guidance is going to be good and right. And so some Sunni Muslims would say, well, look, the only prophets are born without sin, and maybe not all the prophets are anyway born without sin. Really, these people were just humans. And Shia Muslims say, yeah, they're just humans. They're not prophets. They're just human. They're not angels or anything, but they're still without sin. God kept them without sin to make them be the infallible guides. So that's an important, you might have that in the question, what does it mean to say that they're the infallible imams? So infallible means without sin, without error. And Shia Muslims believe they were given as a sign of God's compassion and love for the community of Muslims to be able to guide them and lead them when new situations arose. And so Shia Muslims have the Quran and the Hadith, and then also they have the way that the imams have interpreted those to sort of follow and look at. They're not following that imam like a prophet, but they're following the way that imam might have explained something from the Quran and the Hadith. So later, we've got a quote from Imam Hussein, for example, that we can use, or I've heard Shia Muslims say, Imam Ali explained it like this, and Imam Hussein said it like this. They're kind of guides for the Muslim community. But I said, what about some quotes then? Well, what's the evidence for this if you're writing about it? This is a really important hadith that's used and celebrated by Shia Muslims of when they believe that Ali was chosen to be the right leader, the rightful successor after the Prophet Muhammad. And it was after, traveling back with the Prophet Muhammad, and Ali's there with him. And they get to a place called Ghadir Qum. So this is what's the Hadith of Ghadir Qum is sometimes called. And the Prophet Muhammad is hearing people sort of arguing and talking about Ali for some reason. And he stops and he takes Ali's hand up and he says, whoever I am your leader, the Prophet Muhammad, the leader of the Muslims, Ali is your leader. So for Shia Muslims, that is a sign or a source of authority to say that Ali was chosen to be the first Imam. Any questions about that so far? I've talked quite a lot at you now. Had you heard of this hadith before? Whoever I am your leader, Ali is your leader. Yeah. So it's very disputed within Sunni and Shia Muslims, obviously, as to whether he actually was choosing him as the leader, because Sunni Muslims would say, or, have been told that there was no one chosen, which is why, just let someone else in, which is why Abu Bakr was chosen by the community to be the first caliph. But the first Imam, Shia Muslims would say, was Ali, and he was chosen out of this. The friend and cousin is the same in Arabic, right? Friend and cousin. Maybe, yeah. I know that he was his cousin by blood because they had this, like the same root, the same uncle from that tribe, yeah. But Ali does become the leader. Yeah, what the question, okay, so Amir, going to the Arabic, the word leader that's used is mawla, which could mean like close friend, it could mean leader in that moment, it could mean a political leader, could mean lots of different things. So it is debated what the word leader meant. So that's A level as well. You could say, it is debated whether he meant he was like an imam type leader or whether it just meant a political leader. Ali is the fourth caliph for Sunni Muslims. He does become a leader. So Sunni Muslims say, yeah, he did become the leader. Yeah, that's right, he did. But he wasn't this infallible imam type leader. Does that make sense? So for your exam, you can just know that, if there's a question about the imamate, you can say, Shia Muslims believe that in the infallible imams, and that the first of these was Ali, and he was chosen by the Prophet Muhammad, as shown in the hadith, whoever I am your leader, Ali is your leader. If it's in a 12-mark question, you could say, of course, this is debated because Sunni Muslims would say it's not the same as an imam, the imamate, and actually Ali did become the leader. He became the caliph. So yeah, that's right. He did become the leader. It's just not the same interpretation. If you're interested in that, come and do the A-level because we go right into it. It's really good. So that's because you were asking me for like a quote. That's a really good one to use for why Shia Muslims would say that Ali was the correct, the first Imam and the correct leader. I said I'll go into the next one. But then why have we got this idea, I was just going to let that person in, this idea of purity or being without sin. This idea that, remember the Imams, the infallible Imams, all of them are born without sin and are pure and able to like lead and guide the community. Why is this then? What's the source of authority a Shia Muslim would turn to? Well, there's a quote in the Quran, I find it easy to remember the verse 33, saying, I call it it could be called the verse of purification. Sometimes it's called, so you could just put in the exam, in the verse of purification, the Quran. You can even just put in the Quran, it says, O people of the Prophet's household, or members of the Prophet's household, you are purified completely. Or God wishes to remove all uncleanliness from you. People of the Prophet's household, you have been purified completely. So make sure you write that quote down as well. Now that one, a Shia Muslim would say, look, in the Quran, it says that the people from the Prophet's household are going to be pure from sin. But of course, Sunni Muslims wouldn't agree with that interpretation. They'd say, yeah, maybe those people there in the household there. And actually, there's a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad recites this verse under a cloak. So sometimes it's called the hadith of the cloak. He has a cloak and he gathers Fatima, his daughter, and Ali, his son-in-law, and Hassan and Hussein, his grandsons. They all get under the cloak, and then he recites this verse and says, oh, you have been purified from sin. But it doesn't mean that them and their descendants and their descendants' descendants and all the way down to like 7 or 12 imams are purified from sin. But a Shia Muslim would say that it does. So has everyone got those two quotes written down? So you've got whoever is your leader, Ali, whoever I am your leader, Ali is your leader, and then the verse of purification. So those two are used to say that the imamate is, they're used to back up why Shia Muslims have this belief in imamate. Number one, that Ali was the first imam, and number two, that the imams are born and they live a life without sin. a pure life, because this verse says that they'll be purified from sin. Any questions? I know I'm going very fast. Everyone okay? Had you seen both of those before? Oh, no. Oh, okay. So they are, that verse of purification, I think, is a really powerful one. So if you've got, if you've got, if they might have a question like, explain 2 reasons why Shia Muslims believe in the imamate with reference to a source of authority. Well, then you could use, maybe we could have a go at a quick 5 marker together. What do you think? Do a show of hands if you want me to basically type a 5 marker with you on it now. Oh yeah, okay. Because you can either write it or I can sort of talk you through. Do I have one as an example? Or I've got an influence one. Let's do a 5 marker one, because I don't know what your exam paper is. Imagine if it is that. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know, so that I just prepare you generally for, Okay, in which case I'm going to do here, explain 2 beliefs. So ironic that I can never spell infallible when it means without error, isn't it? My spelling's a bit terrible. With reference. If I do with reference to scripture or authority, then you know what I mean, don't you? Then saving time and typing it up. Okay. So I am going to, so there's 5 marks, so I need to have 2 different beliefs, and one of them has to have a quote. Okay, boom, brilliant. Do you want to write it the same? It's 5 minutes. No, yeah, hi Leah. We finish at 10:30, sometimes a bit more, depending on how long my kids can last watching the TV. Okay, so let's go like this. Okay, and can you see it? Is it large enough? Great. Okay, so 1. What shall I have as my first belief? One belief that Shia Muslim is that that Ali was the first Imam chosen by the Prophet Muhammad. I'm going to say appointed. Oops. Appointed by to be his Then I'm going to leave a gap. I don't know if you get into this habit in the exam, like between each point, I would leave a gap, yeah? We finished there infallible. Oh, yeah. You can if you want. You don't have to. I just wanted to show you how it could look. You can, but you might remember it more if you do, is the idea. But I obviously can't, see what you're all doing there. You can write it if you like, yeah? Or you could look at it later, time yourself. 4 minutes you should spend on this, really. Try and do it in 4 minutes. And I'm not having to say what Sunnis think, the different sides, anything like that. I'm just giving the 2 different beliefs that they have. And I don't have to do a quote for both, but I am. I hope you don't mind. A second, this is because a second belief. Just after his death. I'm going to say here, which means Ali was the first Imam to Muslims. Okay, a second belief is that they'll have about the Imam that they are without sin. No, I can't spell infallible. Terrible. This means that they are do not have any sins or errors. In the community. That was Abla's point about infallible. Shia. Oh no. Shia. Oh no. Shia Muslims believe this because it says in the Quran, oh people, You have been okay, let's check it. Have I done? What have I done? One belief, yeah, I've done the Ali was the first one. Have I said an explanation for it? This means that he's the first Imam to lead the Muslims because Prophet Muhammad chose it. Boom. Have I done a second belief that they are infallible without sin, and that means they don't have any sins or errors to lead the Muslim community? Yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Have I given a source of authority or a quote? Well, I've done one in each. So yeah, boom. And I've linked it to my point. Great. 5 marks. So another way that this might appear in the exam is about influence. And I've just done some marking of some year 9 papers, and the influence one again is something that people are losing marks because they're not saying for the influence question how I might see that. How might I see that a Shia Muslim believes in the infallible Imams? This one is explaining the beliefs, but the 4-mark question is going to be influence. It's going to be how am I going to basically see in the life of a Shia Muslim? They are hard, aren't they? Yeah, that's why I thought I wanted to talk to you about it. So how might I see? I'm going to leave that there for a second, and then we'll come to another slide. So you've got another minute or so to write that down if you are. How might I see it? Now that you've done the practices section, that should be much easier for you. How could I see that a Shia Muslim believes in the Imamate? Type them into the chat for me. By influence, the way I'm remembering influence is belief in action. I think that's going to be the easiest thing for you. Like, how would a person put that belief into action? Like, what would I see? It could be that they have a change in attitude. So sometimes people say they might feel comforted or feel hopeful. But I think the best thing is to think of it as something in action. So what would I be able to see to be able to tell that that person has that belief? So, for example, Abla's put here celebrating. I might not say celebrate. Commemorate is probably a better word, Abla, because it's like, or remember, remembrance of. I would just be careful, don't write celebrate, because I guess it's like a really sad, somber time, and it might feel like a celebration, but just so that you're more specific and the examiner knows that it's not like a celebration in the way that the Eids are and things like that. Yeah. So just, yeah, I just want to help you be a bit more specific. Yeah. So commemorating Ashura. I would see that a Shia Muslim believes in the Imamate because they are going to commemorate Ashura when Imam Hussein was martyred. Because he was the Imam, they're going to think about what happened to him and want to follow his example. Not as a prophet, but just as an example, as a guide. They want to follow his example of doing what? Standing up against injustice, standing up for what's right, standing up for God. So a Shia Muslim will want to do that by either commemorating Ashura, or you might say by, standing up against injustice, because that's what Imam Hussein did. How might I see that a Shia Muslim believes in the justice of God, or Adalat? How might I see that if it's influence? So the belief in Adalat, or the justice of God, will influence a Shia Muslim too. Should we do that one together, actually? Is everyone okay for me to move the slide over? Yeah? Just do a show of hands if you, because I don't know if you're copying it. 1 sec. Okay, cool. I'll just wait a second. So let's do an influence for Adalat, justice of God. And then we will move to practices, because I want to get to the 10 obligatory acts with you. And I've got Kahoot, obviously. Spent more time sorting the Kahoot out than the crossword. Okay, ready? Barbara, you're still writing that? Okay, cool. So let's do, so I hear we were going to have this. Here's quite a nice quote that you could have from Imam Hussein, by the way. God will help the person who cares about other people's needs, both in this world and the hereafter. Are we doing a Kahoot? Oh yeah, it's a quiz game we're going to do later. So this is quite a nice quote here you can have from Imam Hussein. So for your paper, you can use the Quran and the Hadith and the lines from the Imams as well. So I thought this was a really nice one. God will help the person who cares about other people's needs, both in this world and the hereafter. So that's going to be really helpful for us for practices as well. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But let's do a 4-mark question about Adalat, actually. Let's do that, because that has come up before in the past. Ways that I believe in Adalat will influence belief in action. I just think that might be quite an easy way. The same for Christianity, like a belief in action will influence Muslim. And again, you're going to be aiming for this in about 3.5 minutes in the exam. So you're saving yourself time for the 12 marker, yeah? Okay, let's go. We don't need that, but I'm going to put that there because it's quite nice. Okay, oh no, I've got rid of that. So maybe you can write it down actually while I'm writing. What do you think? Just get rid of that. There we go. So one way, belief in Adalat. So let's just remind ourselves, Adalat means justice of God, so God being just. Is that what? They will stand up against injustice in the world because they want to please a just God. What about that? Because I spelled because wrong there. So they will want to stand up against this means that. So what might they do? This means that they might go on demonstrations or protest against unfair things. There we go. So I've got an action. They're going to go on a protest. That's okay, Leah. Also, I'll record this. This is being recorded, so it'll be on later anyway for you. And we're here next week as well. So one way of believing in Adalam and influence is they'll stand up against injustice because they want to please a just God. This means that they might go on demonstrations or protest against unfair things. Fantastic. So a line and then a second way. Is that they will. Now, a belief in action can be like a physical action, or it could be like a change in heart, a change in mind, some kind of change in your thinking about something. So what else should we say? What about if a Muslim was having feeling like they were having an unjust time? What might a belief in Adalat do for them? If they believe that God will be just and just God's justice will reign, and even though times are tough now, it will be fair and just. Just means like fairness and equality. So I might feel like I'm oppressed, have faith that it will get better. I might feel comforted and hopeful, or I might stay strong with my faith. We know that exactly. So I might. Okay, good. So they will, they will have stronger faith in God in times of oppression or hardship, as this means that their faith in Adalat will help them to cope with times of unfairness. So you could again have that for MMA, you could have it for Tawheed, you could have it for the angels, you could have it for holy books, any of these. You just got to think of like actions and ways that a Muslim might behave, or what they might do, or how it might change their thinking. Like what difference does it make, basically, this belief? I guess, yeah. Okay. All right, Leah, nice to see your name there. Fantastic. Bye. So that's Adalat, but now I wanted to switch to talking about practices. So that's some things about belief, and now we're going to switch to practices. Does anyone know what some of the gaps might be for these quotes? You asked me for quotes, so anyone know what some of these gaps might have? And these are all quotes you can use for Muslim practices. We could kind of play a game of noughts and crosses, couldn't we, if you like? Or we can just fill it in. I don't mind. Should we see if we can get a line across? Greater jihad. So which one is that here? Bottom here. We have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad. That is in the hadith. Not all Muslims would agree that this was said, actually, because it's not in the Quran. Some Muslims would say there's no difference between the jihads, it's just struggle, just means jihad. But most Muslims accept that this was a quote that was used, so you can definitely use it. Both Sunni and Shia, jihad is important to both, but only one has it in their set actions that they have to do. We'll come to that in a minute. Any other guesses for the words here? Let's go. Have we got any other guesses? I can barely regular. I can barely read it. Barely regular? That's okay. What if I read keep up regular prayer? Yes, okay. Keep up regular prayer, fantastic. Regular. Keep up regular prayer is obligatory. Fantastic, that's in the Quran. So for both Sunni and Shia Muslims, we've got praying as regular, some slight differences, but they've got prayer as a regular thing. Good. Any other guesses? We've got last is seen as better. This one here, yeah, we've got 3 in a row. Should we keep going and do the rest? So we've got, well done, you've won against whoever we were playing. Repel evil with that which is better. And I love that quote. That is so good for your themes paper as well, isn't it? Because you've got it for forgiveness, reconciliation, you've got it for making, peace, you've got it for maybe crime and justice, because crime and punishment, because you could have things about trying to help people who've been criminals. You've got all of that. So these are really good quotes that I think you can use for many things. Making peace is better. Where was that? Making peace is better. Making peace is better is another good one. I love it. Pacifism, you got it for? Yeah. Prescribed. Fasting is prescribed for you. Brilliant. So these are all quotes you can use for practices. Any other guesses? Something to the house is a duty. So going there, going to the house of God, going on a journey, a special religious journey to the house would be what? Any guesses? Going to the house of God. Hajj. So Hajj is a type of what? Beginning with P. Pilgrimage. Yeah, fantastic. Pilgrimage to the house is a duty. Yep, brilliant. And in an exam, you could have a shorter one. You could say, Hajj is important for Muslims to do once in a lifetime, because it says in the Quran, pilgrimage to the house is a duty. You could shorten it. You don't have to have the whole thing if you want to remember, shorter sections, whichever one's most useful. Okay, so fight in the cause of God, those who fight you, but do not transgress the some things, for God loves not the transgressors. So do not cross anyone know the word? The limits, yeah. That's a really good one for knowing about jihad and how there is limits on it, and it's not just that you've got the different criteria. Did you hear about the criteria, the sort of the rules for when you can and cannot have a jihad, a lesser jihad? Hopefully you learned there's things like transgress means you go over, or you abuse, or you go wrong against. So you are like sinning against God in Christianity is as we transgress. So it's like if you do something wrong, basically, you cross over the limit of what is right. What did we say the limits? So the limits for a lesser jihad would be to not harm civilians, to not destroy the land, it has to be the correct authority. All those things that you've learned are the limits that this is referring to. Muslims would argue. Abu Bakr, actually, another A-level thing. Abu Bakr is the caliph who set out those limits, but the Quran says there are limits. So if there's a question on jihad, you can say, the Quran says you can fight for God, but within certain limits. And then if you want to be super clever, you can say Abu Bakr was the caliph who set out what those limits were, but you don't have to do that. Okay, so where we are here is limits. I'll just, if you're sat here on a Saturday morning, then I think you could take a little bit of extra A-level stuff to wow your examiner, can't you? Great. Oh, no, that's the wrong colour. Okay, let's go with, so who's missing on this list, basically, for zakat? Whatever you give should be for parents, close relatives, the needy, and travelers. There's a really important word that's used like 27 or 30 times in the Quran, this type of person who is deserving of help, beginning with an O. Time and time and time and time again. Yeah, orphans are mentioned as deserving of help, assistance, care. That's fine, Simon, good to see you. So again, you can use that for families and relationships. I know you haven't got that in this mock, but in the future, you can use it for, the importance of family and caring for children in Islam is the fact that orphans is mentioned time and time again. Orphans, have I spelled it right? No, I can't even read what I'm doing here. Orphans. Okay, I'll fix that in a minute. And then finally, I don't know what this one is. Does anyone know what the last one is here? We've got is I've colored the wrong one. I'll leave that green. Oh, you who believe, be mindful of God and strive for his something. Does anyone know? You might not know. Success could be success, or this translation is cause. I thought that's quite a nice one for striving for the cause of God, doing what God is wishing, and in God's name. That's going to come up for us as well. Enlightenment, yeah, to do with the Shia 10 obligatory acts. I spelled orphans wrong. Let me just change that so this right. Okay, so you have actually got that here. So again, you can come back to this later to see. You've got the 9 here. That's a really good one to have to learn these quotes. You can use them in lots of different types of questions. The thematic paper as well, you can use it as well. Okay, looking at the time. So we've got in Muslim practices, you've probably, hopefully, learned that Sunni Muslims have what's called the 5 pillars. Show of hands if you've heard of that. Please, everyone, you must have hopefully heard. Yeah, you've got the 5 pillars in Sunni Islam. You might have done things like writing an essay where you say one is more important than the other. You might have to talk about, remember for the practices paper, instead of it being an influence, that belief in action, it's always going to be 2 different ways that a certain thing is done. So it might be 2 different ways that, or 2 different actions on Hajj, or 2 different ways that prayer is done, or so you have to know there's sort of variations of the different parts of these actions, but each of them has got its roots in the Quran, in the teachings, of Islam. That's why they're important. They're all taken from the Quran as things that Muslims should do in their life. So we've got Shahada, Salah, Zakat, Saum, Hajj. And I would say in a 5 marker, Sunni Muslims perform these actions because it says in the Quran. These are all taken from the Quran. You can even use the Shahada, that's fine, yeah. You can use the Shahada as a source of authority as well. So you could say, in the belief section, Sunni Muslims believe this because it says in the Shahada. But the Shahada as it is, as a whole thing, isn't actually found directly in the Quran, the whole Shahada. But the first section of it is there's no God but God. So you can say, that section is found in the Quran. Brilliant. So the 5 pillars, you've heard about them. What you also need to know, and you asked me about this, is the 10 obligatory acts, which are the actions that are said in Shia Islam. Now look, the 5 pillars don't have jihad in it. And yet jihad is an important thing for Muslims to strive for what is good, isn't it? To fight for what's good and to, to have that inner greater jihad of struggling for, and the Prophet Muhammad talked about jihad, but it's not in the 5 pillars. But you do have, but it's still important, but it's not in the 5 pillars. Whereas in Shia Islam, you do have jihad as one of the 10 obligatory acts. So again, you can have this later, you can come back and see this later, but I've got across the top, I've got the 5 that are, the first 4, Salah, Saum, Zakat, and Hajj, are all things that are in the Sunni 5 pillars. In fact, I'm just going to highlight that for us. These are all in the 5 pillars. I think my son's about to run in. And this one is one that is also important in Sunni Islam, isn't it? Yeah. The ones that you might not be, and all of those you can give quotes for. We've just looked at them. There's a quote you can use for each of those. They all have their basis in the Quran and, and hadith and things like that. And then the same, a Shia Muslim would say the same, that their other 5 are also founded in the Quran and in the hadith and in the actions of the Prophet Muhammad. The Shia Muslim would say, yeah, these are also there. So just don't make the mistake in the exam of saying, Sunni Muslims follow the Quran, so they do the 5 pillars, whereas Shia Muslims have these extra things. They also would look to the Quran and say, yeah, this is where the proof is this is what we should do. Just because the 2 traditions have grown slightly differently because of the different leadership, it's just phrased in a different way and a different emphasis, So I would say these are also things which are important to Sunni Muslims, but they're just not learned as part of the 5 pillars. So you have got khums, the tax. So again, you might have a question in the exam about like 2 different ways Muslims pay, 2 different ways for paying money to charity or alms giving, sometimes the word they use. You could talk about zakat and you could talk about khums. That's fine, Adam. So show of hands if you've heard about the khums tax. Hopefully in class. Yeah, a couple of you. So within Muslim practices, you've got zakat. Shia Muslims give zakat, about 2.5% of their money once a year. But khums is an additional tax that's paid, and it's 20% of, because in the Quran it says give 1/5 of what you require. So it's after a battle, if you have some things that you've gained after a battle and you kind of suss out what you've got left over, then a fifth of that is to be given to the religious authorities. And some of that money is used to help poorer people in the community. Some of it's used to pay for the mosque and sort of, the clerics and things like that. So it's an additional tax that's paid. But it has its roots in the Quran, because the Quran says give a fifth of what you acquire. And then we have got Amir bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar. I don't think they're going to give you those phrases exactly in the exam, but they might ask you questions about the obligatory acts that you could refer to it. And for this, there's a really, really good quote that's a big part of our A-level course, which is at the top. And if you can all write it down, because I think it would be really helpful for you, and you could use it for loads of different things in Islam. Enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. So everyone, can you write that down? The Quran instructs all Muslims to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. So it's a verse that says there will be a people who will be, enjoining the good and forbidding the wrong. Muslims are instructed to do this. Enjoin means to encourage and sort of help people to do it, to facilitate and to help people and to encourage it. Encourage the good and sort of, help people to do the right thing. My A-level students often make the mistake of writing enjoy the good, but it's enjoin the good. To enjoin the good, it means like to encourage people to do it, to get people doing good things, and forbid the wrong, or sometimes it's discourage the wrong. So things that are wrong, okay, mate, that's wrong. We shouldn't be doing that. Think about in the playground, active bystanders. We just talked about this, haven't we, this week? Can you be the one who is helping people to do the right thing and helping steer people away from doing the wrong thing? I was thinking about that when we were doing about anti-bullying week this week. So enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. That's in the Quran, so it's for all Muslims. Shia Muslims have taken that verse, and then from that they've developed other bits of the 10 obligatory acts. So to encourage people doing what's good is based on the Quranic instruction to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. Forbidding evil by discouraging people from doing what's wrong is based on the Quranic instruction to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. So this verse, all of the 10 obligatory acts are taken from the Quran, as Shia Muslim would say, but this is the way that their practices have been developed, different to the 5 pillars. Because it doesn't say in the Quran on the first page, okay, everyone, to be a Muslim, you will follow these 5 pillars. It doesn't list them like this. This has been developed through the years by different Muslim scholars. Yeah, it doesn't say here are our 6 articles of faith. It's been developed. So because the 2 branches developed slightly differently from the same source, they've got these 2 variations of what they've developed, but they both come back to the same source, which we said at the beginning of the Quran and the Hadith. And then we have got Tawalia, which is showing love. Beautiful, showing love, which is wonderful, isn't it? And then a quote here is a people who God loves and who love him. I think that's a really nice quote you can use. You could use that to do with God's omnibenevolence as well, the nature of God. You could use it to do with, jihad, striving for what's right and acting out of love to help other people. And then you have something called the Tabara, which is disassociation. So the idea that you shouldn't, if there's an enemy of God or someone who's fighting against God, or if you're at war and, there's people fighting against you, you shouldn't associate with them. And I guess this sort of comes from, the time when the revelations were being revealed. There was people being really severely persecuted and treated really badly for being Muslim. And, were you being a traitor and going over to that side, were you going to go and join them and then fight against the Muslim community? So an example in the Quran that's given is of Abraham, when he realized that his family weren't going to stop worshipping idols. He had to break off ties with them, and he had to say, okay, I can't take part in this action with you anymore. So I thought that was quite a good quote. You can use it for prophethood as well, can't you, for Muslim beliefs? Are there any questions at the moment about any of these 10 obligatory acts? You aren't going to get asked, you just might get asked about 2 examples of 10 obligatory acts, or you might get asked about, quotes, that sort of thing. So maybe one thing you can do after this is make yourself a quote sheet, go through this PowerPoint, pull out all the quotes, put them together, and see how you can use them. Fantastic. So the last thing I was going to talk to you about is Ashura. Ashura, I'm hoping that everyone's still here and focused. Anyway, I'll talk to you about Ashura. We said earlier about not necessarily calling it a celebration or a festival, but we could call it a commemoration or an act of remembrance. And just know that actually Ashura is also important within Sunni Islam. It's not just a Shia thing. Can someone type in before I get to it how Ashura is connected to Sunni Islam? Does anyone know? So like before what happened with Imam Hussein and everything happened, it was already something established as an important date by the Prophet Muhammad. And so some Sunni Muslims actually fast on this day. Have anyone heard of anyone fast? Yeah, so Hussein's martyrdom is obviously important. It's still an important part of Muslim history, but it's very, very important in Shia Islam because he had that role as the Imam. But within Sunni Islam, it's still an important, before that even happened, the Prophet Muhammad, remember he's the grandfather of Hussein, he established this as a day of fasting. And it was a kind of day of celebration. Did you know about this? Okay, because you could use it if there's two different ways that Muslims celebrate or remember Ashura. So for Sunni Muslims, and in the Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad, as the reporters have said, this is the day of Ashura. Allah has not enjoined its fasting on you, hasn't instructed or obliged you to fast, but I am fasting it. So it's an optional fasting day. And sometimes I'm teaching about Ashura around this time, slightly earlier in October. And I've got sometimes students, often a teaching assistant, oh yeah, I'm fasting today for Ashura. So it's not an obligatory fast, it's an optional one that because the Prophet Muhammad used to fast on this day, because the Prophet Muhammad saw Islam as a continuation of Judaism. Think of the prophets, Abraham, Adam, Noah, David. He saw it as a continuation, the same religion that's been revealed, finally revealed to him through the Quran. So because Jewish people were celebrating on this day and remembering what God had done in the past, he said, well, I'm going to remember this too. Remember, first Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem, not towards Mecca. And so he also fasted on that day as a kind of continuation of the Jewish faith. And so many Sunni Muslims might fast on this day as a day it can help to sort of pay for some of the sins that you may have done during that year, or it might be it's not obligatory, it's an optional fast day. So you could say one way that Muslims celebrate Ashura is Sunni Muslims celebrate as an optional fasting day because the Prophet Muhammad did. In the Hadith it says, this is the day of Ashura. Allah has not enjoined its fasting on you, but could you share a quick fact? How quick? Yeah, of course you can, that's fine. I don't mind a quick fact. Yeah. Oh, by typing. Okay, so it's a quick fact, but you're going to type it to us. Brilliant. Okay, good. So has everyone got that quote down from the Hadith about Ashura, Sunni Islam Hadith? We shall just wait while one sec. Okay, we're just waiting for this fact. Okay, I'm waiting now. One second. Let's see. Everyone ready? Kind of getting there? The Kaaba's in the middle of the globe. Americans tried to flip the globe, but they didn't want it there, no matter which way it was. It would remain in the middle. Okay, I've never heard of that before. Because it's a globe, isn't the middle depending how you're looking at it? I don't understand the physics of that. Oh, on the world flat, if you look at it flat. But that might depend on how you open it. Like, wherever you are, you might see yourself as in the middle, isn't it? I've never heard of that. I would flatten it. Yeah. Wow. Okay. The Americans tried to flip the globe. Oh, so no matter which way you look at it, it's going to be in the middle. Upside down, the other way around, it's always in the middle, the equator line, the dot. I suppose it's always going to kind of be in the middle because it's near the equator. But it might depend where you start the map from, because obviously we've always done our map. Oh, this is getting very, we've always done our map with Europe in the middle because we've said, we're so important, haven't we? We've gone, we're so important, we must be in the middle. So it's always going to be, yes, very interesting. I'll try flipping my maps later and see what happens. But I love the idea of us trying to turn the whole globe around to stop the Kaaba being in the middle. Okay, so back to Ashura. Sunni Muslims may celebrate Ashura. We can use the word there because it's a celebration. It's a fast, a day of celebration, and a day where you can sort of make up for sins you might have committed during the year. Optional fast day, because the Prophet Muhammad fasted on this day, and you can use the quote. But the kind of big famous thing, Ashura, is more known. So that was happening, established the Prophet's lifetime. The Prophet's grandson, Hussein, was martyred on the date of Ashura. Ashura is 10 in Arabic, so it's the 10th day of the month of Muharram. So actually the whole month of Muharram is important for Shia Muslims who remember the events leading up to his death. But the 10th day is when, so it's a commemoration that lasts several days as Shia Muslims remember the different parts of the story. And it's the date that the Prophet's grandson, Imam Hussein, was martyred. So he died for his sort of faith and his belief because he did not accept the caliphate, the caliph at the time, who was called Yazid I. So because he didn't accept Yazid as the caliph, and actually some Muslims at the time asked him to come and become the leader because they didn't accept him. They said, can you come and be the leader? You're Hussein, you're the Prophet's grandson, you knew the Prophet. There are hadith about the Prophet Muhammad holding his grandsons after like traveling and then coming and holding them and having that little toddler sort of snuggle. I don't know if you've ever done that with a baby brother or sister or cousin, and doing that, you know, they were that close. Or he used to pray and they'd climb over him, you know, and they said, well, you had that closeness to the Prophet Muhammad. He gathered them under the cloak and said, you're purified from sin. So why can't you be the leader? So off he went to go and take the leadership back from Yazid, who he saw as a corrupt caliph. So Yazid isn't one of the first ones. You've got like some of the caliphs were seen as really good, rightly guided, good people, Abu Bakr, Uthman, Omar, and Ali. But then after that, some of the leaders were seen as becoming corrupt. And so Imam Hussein was asked to go and become the leader. But on the way, he is circled by Yazid's army in the desert. So he's circled in a place called Karbala, which is in modern-day Iraq. And so he's circled, and then their water supplies cut off, their food supplies cut off. And this is all remembered during the stories to do with Muharram and building up to Ashura in Shia mosques and Shia families during this time. All the stories remembered of how he was basically kind of abandoned, and the people who said, come and we will fight with you, abandoned him and betrayed him and didn't come and fight by his side. And then there ends up being a sort of bloody and gruesome sort of series of deaths that happen for the people with him, and then eventually ending in his death. So you've all heard that story, hopefully, in class. Learn a bit about that story. Have you? Yeah. So you've heard that story of Ashura. So a little bit about it. So it's to do with this betrayal. The promise, we will stand by you, but you know, and also Yazid was seen as corrupt, unjust, unfair, slavery, drinking alcohol, having many, 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 many wives. He was just seen as a corrupt leader, an unjust and unfair leader. And Imam Hussein was asked to come and say, would you be the leader? Because you know the true path of Islam. Can you come? You know, you're the Prophet's grandson. But those people abandoned him and he was left. He thought he'd have an army of people fighting with him, but they weren't there. And there was only 72 companions left with him. Some were Muslims, some were others. People just met him on the way and joined him. So for Shia Muslims, they sort of remember this whole part of this, the build up to the story. So like on different nights, they might go to the mosque and hear different parts of the story, or at home, they might retell the story. In some parts of the world, there'll be actual like plays put on where it's reenacted and shown. Pakistan, for example, is a place where they'll put on sort of plays that show what happened to keep the story alive of someone who stood up for justice against injustice, and he lost his life. When I learned about this, I actually went along to one of these services at the Inclusive Mosque and heard a Shia Muslim retelling this. It was really, really powerful. And it reminded me when I was Christian, we used to do the same thing about Jesus dying on the cross. You know, each day we'd go and remember the different bits that happened in the build up to Jesus dying on the cross. And then we remember. And I used to sit in church and have to think, you know, the preacher would say, what would you have done when Jesus was on the cross? Would you have abandoned him like his friends did? Or would you have been with him? And it's the same really for this. It's like Shia Muslims are thinking, well, would I have had the courage and the guts to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong, like the Quran tells me to? to look out for people who are being oppressed? Would I have stood with him even though I'd risked my life, or would I have been one of the ones who betrayed him? And that's really the message, is that it's a really tragic thing that happened, but it's sort of trying to remind Shia Muslims that this is their duty, is to stand up. So many Shia Muslims around the time of Ashura will go on demonstrations against unfair things, or where people are oppressed around the world. Many will choose to donate blood as a way of shedding their blood for something good. Many Shia Muslims will try to do really good charitable acts during this time, because they're wanting to show, if I had been there, I would have done the right thing and not the wrong thing. And if you remember, adalat, or justice, is a really important Shia belief, the adalat, the justice of God. So it does link, you see, so that's why you could use the two together. Now, what Ashura is also famous for, I guess, is that some Shia Muslims, although all the clerics now have said that they shouldn't be doing this, but some Shia Muslims would choose to literally shed their blood, and they whip themselves or cut and shed their blood as a sign of being willing to do that with Imam Hussein for justice, for right, and for goodness, because he shed his blood for good. So this is like, if you Google, you don't have to Google it if you don't want to. This is the thing that's quite sensationalist, and this is what people always think of when you say Ashura. I don't know if people talked about it in class with you as well. Oh, this is what Shia Muslims do, they will do that. When I went along to a service, there was no hint of that. There was just a group of Muslims. The one thing that people did do was this, where they just did that, just to sort of remember the pain and the physical thing. Now you might say, well, why do that? Well, in religion, people do use their body for different things. If I fast during Ramadan, I feel hungry. I feel how people feel when they're not eating, and I want to give them more money for charity, don't I? Or some Catholic Christians in the past used to use something to beat themselves when they'd sinned, but very, very few. It's not like everybody, but this is again something that do Catholics do that? They used to do this to play penance, to ask for God's forgiveness. So we do use our bodies sometimes, but this is the thing that most people kind of think of when they think of Ashura. And like I say, the Muslim clerics at the moment are saying we shouldn't be doing that. It's not right. You could write an exam that a minority of Shia Muslims may shed their blood, cut themselves to remember the blood that was shed by Imam Hussein. But just remember that your examiner might be a Shia Muslim who's never done that in their life, never heard of it, and had people say it to them every day, all the time, and they've never even seen it, So just be careful when you're writing the exam. If you only write about that part, then you don't know who's marking it. You want to be as accurate as you can. Another teacher who used to teach at Morpeth, Miss Rahman, she went off to Syria before the war and everything. Around this time, she was like, right, I'm going to go and see it. I want to see it for myself. And she sort of sat herself down there, and she thought she'd see it on the streets. Nothing happened. She was like, on the news, it's like all they talked about. When you Google it, it's all you see. She was literally in the middle of a Shia area in Syria and didn't see anything. So it's not done as much as we think it is, I guess. And there's what I'm going to say. But it is, the point is, people may shed their blood to remember the blood that was shed by Imam Hussein. Exactly. Yeah. And that's a whole other thing, isn't it? It's very misleading. So I just want you to be careful in the exam. I've got people who I know who are Shia Muslims, who are teachers, who are examiners. So if they mark your paper, you want to just write it in a way that shows that, okay, maybe some people do that, but the vast majority don't. The teachings are that you shouldn't be shedding your blood or harming yourself. And it's never done to a point of, where you're endangering yourself, basically, I guess. But it's very exciting on the news, isn't it, to have that on there. You're going to get hits and clicks, but that's getting back to the media. I would say something along the lines of, now many Muslims might choose to give blood. So they're shedding their blood, but then it is for a good cause, enjoying the good, forbid the wrong, or showing love, because then that can be used to save lives. And whoever saved the life of one person is as if they saved the whole of mankind. So you might need to know different ways Ashura is commemorated or celebrated. Here I've got, there you go. I've got more explanations here. Some might go on a pilgrimage to Kabbalah. And this quote is a very good one. I leave two weighty things, the Quran and my family, is the Shia version of this quote, which is used to say, well, why might Shia Muslims want to commemorate this action? Well, because Imam is very important, because he was one of the Prophet Muhammad's family. And you can use that too for the imamate. Oh, gosh, I've talked a lot there at you. Any questions right now about that? I have got an example paragraph about how Ashura could be seen as significant to both Sunni and Shia Muslims. So you can see how I've done my paragraph, but I really want to keep up with the traditions and finish with a Kahoot. Everyone happy to play a quick Kahoot before we go? Yeah, seeing as I made it this morning, got up early to make it. Great. Okay. So let me go to my Kahoot. Here we go. Save. Okay, let's play this Kahoot now. Okay, share this tab instead. Here we go. It should be appearing for you. There you go. Everyone got it? Slide. Waiting for Adam. Come here. Adam, here. Adam. Rebecca's with it. Give it Rebecca. Adam here. Adler's his name. Everyone? 1, 2, 3, 4. There should be one more person. Come here. Adam. Adler, Rebecca, his name. Oh, that must be everyone, is it? Because I'm 2 if I'm sharing. Okay, let's go. Oh, I like music. Yeah, okay, here we go. Hopefully everything is what we've done today, and all of it's right. I hope so. Okay. Which of these is not in the 5 roots of faith? That's the word. Yeah, it's so Nabawa is the word that's used in the 5 roots of faith for prophethood. I was trying to be a bit sneaky with this. Risala is the word that's used in the Sunni 6 articles of faith for prophethood. So it's a bit sneaky, really, because it is in the 5 roots of faith, but not that specific word. I thought that was a bit cheeky of me. Hope you don't mind. Brilliant. Well done, Rebecca. 2. Who does Shia Muslims say was the first Imam? Ali, Hussein, Muhammad, or Adam? Yes, so Adam was the first prophet, but the first Imam, because the Imams aren't prophets, was Ali. I'll leave it up to you to think what you think about that. There we go, bad jokes. Here we are, next. Well done, Rebecca's still in the lead here. We have got, what is so special about Imam Mahdi? We didn't talk about Mahdi. So if you don't know, maybe you need to just go over it in the revision. Yeah. Well, you should be able to get it by the process of elimination, because, waiting for the last one, because he's not remembered with Ashura because that is Hussein. He wasn't the first Imam because that's Ali. He wasn't given the Quran because that's the Prophet Muhammad. So he's the final Imam who went into something called spiritual hiding, and he's awaiting for the end of the world to come. So when the end of the world comes, he will reappear, and Sunni Muslims too believe there will be a figure called the Mahdi who will be there as well at the end of the world. So Shia Muslims believe he's gone into hiding, or there's a really fancy word called occultation. So he didn't die. He's kind of a little bit like, I guess, the Holy Spirit is for Christians. He's here, but not physically here. So that's another belief about the imamate, which you can just go back over, hopefully with your revision if you don't know, or just learn the name and that he's the final last Imam. Wow, Rebecca on fire with your hat on there. Where is this quote from? God will help the person who cares about other people's needs. I did mention it briefly. I did say, oh, you could use this quote from this person. Yeah. Did I say it too far? Yeah, so well done. It was Imam Hussein. So Hassan was his brother. They were both the grandsons of the Prophet Muhammad. So Imam Hussein said this, and so you could use that to do with standing up for injustice, or the importance of Ashura, or to do with the imamate. Yeah, so it's a quote that you can use. I know it's not the Quran or Hadith, but you can use this as a source of authority in the exam if you say, as the Imam Hussein said. or this is important for Shia Muslims because the Imam Hussein said. 5. What term means the justice of God? You better get this one. Justice, Imamate is that the rightly guided leaders, the rightly chosen people to be leaders from the Prophet Muhammad's bloodline. Adalat is the justice of God. Okay, let's go. Let's move it along a bit quicker, Miss Marks. Which of these is not in the 10 obligatory acts? Now, it is important to Shia Muslims that there is only one God and Muhammad is the messenger of God. We've got Tawheed and prophethood in their 5 roots of faith. But this is seen as a idea or a belief that all of the 10 obligatory acts are based on. It's kind of a given. If you're Muslim, you believe that, and then these are the actions. So the Shahada is important, but it's not one of the 5 pillars. So even when you look at the 5 pillars, you might have written an essay about why that's different to the other ones. The other ones are kind of like physical actions, aren't they? Whereas this one is a statement of belief. So that's why it's not in the 10 obligatory acts, but it's still important to Shia Muslims. 7. Where do Shia Muslims read the instruction to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong? Yes, well done, in the Quran. So it's in the Quran that it states that that statement. It's a really, really good one you can use for loads of different questions, I believe. So yeah, I think it's a good one for you to take, put in your pocket and keep for later. 8. Oh, this should be, do you know what, whichever one you, I should have, yeah. Either of them will be right, I think I'm right. It is false. Shia, Ashura is a day that's not only important to Shia Muslims, because it is also important to Sunni Muslims, isn't it? Because of, it's a non-obligatory fast, because the Prophet Muhammad fasted. Don't know what I did with the meaning of that. This one too, hopefully. This, I don't know why it says multi-select. The 10 obligatory acts are all taken from the Quran. True or false? Are they all in the Quran? Would a Shia Muslim be able to give you a Quranic verse for all of them? Actually, that is true. I don't know what has gone on there, why they're both ticked. Yeah, they are all taken from the Quran. So I need to change this before I send it out to everybody. A Shia Muslim would say they're all in there. It's just the way it's been developed is different to how the 5 pillars have been sort of put together in Sunni Islam by the different Sunni sort of scholars, I guess is what we argue. So let's see. Finally, only Sunni Muslims give zakat. Is that true or false? Brilliant, we got that right, because Shia Muslims give zakat and comes on top. So we have got here Abla in 3rd place, well done. Amir in 2nd place. And in 1st place, we have got Rebecca. Well done, everybody. So, I think I'm going to say goodbye to you this morning and say that I'm just going to stop music. If there is anything now, just before we go, any specific things for next week that you'd like to do? I was thinking about general revision, because you'll have the mock on the Monday, basically. So Saturday we can meet. We have another week, don't we? Yeah, you do, don't you? Yeah, because the mock's on the 28th. So yeah, Monday's we've got one more. So how to write a 12 marker. Yes, so 12 marker. Would you like us to do that on, maybe we should do it on existence of God, because we revised that weeks ago, didn't we? And influence. Okay, so we'll do more influence questions. Influence and 12 markers. I think that'd be, yeah, brilliant. Okay. So I'll just pick some influence 12 markers to do from around the different topics that are going to be in the mock. But I will say goodbye to you again, and thank you so much for coming. It's good to see you. And I'll see you next Saturday. Bye.